Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a very special edition of the podcast. This is the real Jason Duncan, and I'm glad that you're here because back in 2025, I had the pleasure of sitting down on the Future Factory podcast, which is one of the top-rated podcasts in the world, and recording a great show. And Anthony was a great host, and he asked great questions, and we talked about how to exit your business without necessarily having to sell your business. And then I actually had the pleasure of sitting down and having lunch with Anthony in Chicago back in February of 26 when I was there speaking at an event. Great guy, great business, 100% real dude. You're going to love this episode, so please enjoy this special edition of my show as you listen to Anthony's show, the Future Factory Podcast.
Welcome back to the podcast. Today we've got Jason Duncan with us. He's going to show us how to make value of your company. For those entrepreneurs who want to find out an exit plan, he's going to show you how to do that and maybe where you're stepping on your own air hose and thoughts of maybe someday exiting the companies that you're so strongly building. Jason, welcome to the show.
It's good to be here, Anthony.
Well, look, a lot of us entrepreneurs somewhere would like to retire, right? Or how many of us that are out there thinking, I can do this for a little bit longer, but somewhere out there, I'd like to find a way to exit this and get the payoff of all the hard work I've done for all these years, putting it out there. And I have no idea what to do.
Well, first, I think you got to understand is that 83% of businesses that list for sale are never going to sell. And that's not me making that up. That's actual stats. If you can look at the International Business Brokers Association, they're going to tell you that. And that 73% of those businesses that don't sell, the reason they don't is owner dependence. So we've got to think about business very differently if we ever want to exit.
Well, hold on, wait. So you're saying that I can't be the one that the business depends upon?
No, you cannot. Well, you can if you want, but if you want to exit, that's not ever going to work. You're just building the job with the logo.
I like when people say that. Look, I get that, right? I get that there's been times where, and especially when I first started building the companies that I owned, right? There was something about, I actually got something out of it. People, one of my business coaches came to me and goes, "You realize you're getting a payoff from this?" I'm like, "Well, what do you mean?" I would complain about if I'm not there, if I wouldn't run right. And, oh my God. And I had all this stuff about, if I wasn't there, the company wasn't going to work. And she looked at me, she goes, "Yeah, you're creating that." I go, what do you mean I'm creating that? She goes, yeah, you get some sort of payoff from that. You don't even know it. And when she told me that, from a psychological point of view, I'm like, how could she be right? Right. And there was something about that I had to start to unwind why I was doing that. What was the payoff and kind of what was the story I was trying to tell the world by me doing that. So there was a lot I had to learn from that. Maybe you dive into and talk a little bit about how entrepreneurs are doing that all the time.
Well, think about it in terms of the normal American household. For those of us who have dogs, or if you've ever had a dog or know people that have dogs, there's this annoying thing about dogs. If they're in the house and the doorbell rings, they bark incessantly. And what happens? Most of the people don't like that. They tell the dog to shut up. Don't do that. Don't do that. But the real reason they bark like that is because you trained them to bark like that. They didn't. A dog doesn't know what a doorbell is, right? Come on, let's be real. A dog doesn't, but he's doing it because you've trained him to do it, whether you meant to or not. And entrepreneurs are doing the same thing. So if your team is too overly dependent upon you, if everything runs across your desk, if all decisions are made by you, you trained them to do that. And that's the reality. That's what your business coach told you. And that's what I, as a business coach, tell a lot of my clients. It's like, if your employees act in a way you don't want them to act, you've trained them to be that way, whether overtly or inadvertently, you've trained them to be that way. So it requires a total mindset shift from thinking about building a business as an owner operator to moving to what I call the owner investor mentality. It's very different.
Well, let's talk a little bit about how to do that.
All right. So an owner, there's 3 tiers of the entrepreneurial evolution, I believe. And this is kind of the basis of what I teach, is that if you look at it like a triangle or a pyramid, and there's a section at the bottom, and there's 3 tiers. Top tier is where we want to be. But the bottom tier, tier 1, those are owner operators. And they're focused on activity over asset, that they're always looking at activity. It's more sales, more this, more that. It's always doing something. And that's 90+% of entrepreneurs never leave the owner operator tier 1 status. Tier 2, right in the middle, I'd say maybe 10%, 5 to 10% of entrepreneurs might move into that category called, I call owner manager. And this is where they have teams of people doing things. So if like you look at it as an ice cream shop owner operators are ordering the ice cream, scooping the ice cream, serving the customers, taking the money. That's an owner operator. Tier 2, owner manager might own the shop and you got people running it, but you still order everything. You still do all the books. You still make sure the flavors are right. Like you might not be doing it all, but you're managing it all. And it still requires you to be there. The third tier is owner, what I refer to as owner investor. That's tier 3. And that's when you're not working in it, not even working on it. You're working above it. It is now an investment for you to manage as an investment. So if you invest in an apartment complex, for example, you ain't going to collecting rents. You're not even managing the person who collects the rents. It's a part of your portfolio. And I think we can run businesses that way. Now, if you think about the billionaire entrepreneurs around us, they're tier 3. They're not managing day to day. They're certainly not scooping the ice cream. They've moved to a different level of idea and mindset around what it means to own a business. You cannot become a billionaire entrepreneur as an owner operator or owner manager. You have to move into owner investor. And that requires a mindset shift with that. You can't be the hero of the business. You can't do everything yourself. You have to develop systems and teams and people, and you got to delegate.
It's the hardest shift for the entrepreneur, at least for me. I mean, I've been an entrepreneur for my whole life, and I would tell you that is one of the hardest shifts because that owner operator, right? That first one, there was a payoff I had in doing that, right? Because you know, a lot of us entrepreneurs, you know, I didn't go to college, so my first businesses were literally my college, right? It was kind of me showing the world. This was my education, right? It kind of, I was proving something to the world, and by all that action and activity, there was some sort of proof. I got a payoff from it, right? Here, so let me show you what I've done, right? And there was some, this is who I am, and then maybe I got into owner manager, right, where I had a team of people, and I could show you that. Now to make that next shift takes a bunch of, I mean, it's a really tough spot to be in, where you got to find people who are smarter than you to run the business. And most entrepreneurs can't make that leap. I mean, it's a difficult one to make.
It very much so is. And that's why if you look at the 3 tiers, most people stay in tiers 1 and 2 because it is difficult. It requires a different set of mindset. It requires a different set of doing things, different way of doing things. And frankly, most entrepreneurs are comfortable in running everything and being needed. They're addicted to being needed, and they're okay with that. And look, you know, I would say that's not the best way to run and own a business, but I also understand it. I get it. You know, I was that guy when I started my first company for probably 6 years. I was the hero of the business. I was the number 1 salesperson. I managed all the finances. I managed all the administration, and I didn't know any better. I just thought that's what entrepreneurs were supposed to do. And then as I started getting a little, I don't know, a tiny bit smarter and started hanging around people smarter than me, I realized, wait a minute, there's a different way to do this. But really what punched me in the face, Anthony, is in 2018, we were getting close to the end of the year and we were going to hit that golden pinnacle that I'd always aimed at, $1 million EBITDA. We were hitting $1 million for the first time in our business history. And I thought, we've hit it. This is it. It's a 7-figure bottom line. This is amazing. Let's sell the company. So I talked to my business coach and I said, hey man, let's help me get this thing listed for sale. And he looked at me and he said, can't do it. And I said, why? He said, well, the reason you want out is the same reason no one wants in. The business is too dependent on you. And I thought, this guy's nuts. And as we started talking about it, I found out he was true. And here's how I knew he was true. So in 2019, just 1 year later, I go through a pretty nasty partner split. And it consumed probably 75% of my attention for an entire year. Just legal stuff, all the crap that you might imagine in a situation like that. And at the end of that year, something happened that had never happened before. We lost money. I mean, think about it. We go from 7-figure bottom line to losing money in the course of about 12 to 13 months. And it hit me that my business coach was 100% right, because it didn't make money because I was not there. It was 75% of my time I'm doing other things and only 25% of the business. And it proved him right in the most terrible and painful of ways, is that I had created a monster that required me. So the business wasn't worth anything. Now I could have sold it maybe for $1 million. I don't know, maybe, probably more likely a few $100,000, and that's it. But that's not what I wanted. So I spent the next 18 months figuring out how to extricate myself from the daily operations of the business without selling it. And that's how Exit Without Exiting was born.
Interesting. So, making that shift, so now you're backing your way out. Let's talk about, how did you make that? How did you make that transition happen?
Well, the first thing I did is I had to shift my mindset. I had to start thinking differently about who should be doing things. And so here's what I did. So I had 4 department leaders in my company, and I pulled them in and I said, look, here's what happened. And I didn't have to give them the 100% of the details of all the finances, although one of them was my director of finance, so she already knew everything. I said, here's the deal. We made a lot of money last year, and this money we made none. We actually lost money, and here's why. It's because it depended upon me, and not in an arrogant way like, hey, without me, you can't make it. That's not what this is about. Anybody who's thinking that right now has never been an entrepreneur in this situation, because it's not about arrogance, although there are a lot of arrogant entrepreneurs out there, but that's not what this is about. This was just about, I'd created a monster that required too much of it required my heartbeat to operate, and that shouldn't be. So I explained that to them, and they understood. They're like, yeah, right. I mean, we that can't be. And because that puts their jobs at danger. It puts all of them at risk.
It puts everybody at danger.
So when I talked to them, I said, here's what we're going to do. In a practical way, I'm going to forego a large chunk of my pay that I take as the owner and CEO of the business, and I'm going to give that to each of you. And it was 5 figures each that they were getting this huge raise. And their job now is going to be to run dailies. They're going to run the daily operations. I was going to be with them every week. I'd check in on Mondays. I'd meet with them for 2 or 3 hours, make sure everything's going good. And then it went to every other week, and then every month, and then once a quarter. And we weaned ourselves off of needing Jason to make all of the decisions. So practically, that's what happened. Now, behind the scenes, it was documenting everything, making sure that every process, every system was documented, that it was repeatable, that people were following it. We had to make sure that vendor relationships weren't tied into my friendship with the owner of that other company. There were a lot of things I had to disentangle. There was a lot of strategic disentanglement that had to happen. It took about 18 months, and that was all during COVID. It was during 2020, 2021, and it was tough because we worked in hospitals all across the country. That's what we did. And so it made it very, very difficult. And I had to change some of the ways that I would have done it had COVID not happened. But from a practical standpoint, Anthony, that's what I did.
So I know you kind of coined a name for that method.
Yeah, Exit Without Exiting. I wrote a book about my experience, and that's when what was funny is that people knew that I wasn't in the office all the time. They'd say, hey, Jason, did you sell the company? I said, no, I didn't sell the company. And they're like, yeah, but you're doing other things and you started other companies. What's going on? Well, I exited. Well, I thought you didn't exit. Well, I exited without exiting. So the phrase just kind of morphed into reality. And then one of my business coaches at the time, he said, that's it. I said, what do you mean that's it? He goes, exit without exiting. I said, okay, what about it? He goes, that's your thing. I said, what do you mean that's my thing? He said, every coach, every influencer, every speaker, they've got to have their thing that's unique, and that's your thing. So he said, you need to write a book about it. So it took me, I don't know, about a year. And I sat down with some publishers, and we figured out and editors, and figured out how to put this story. And the first pass of the book sucked. I read it. I was like, this is terrible. Nobody's going to want to read this, because even though I weaved my story into it, it really was more teaching, like this, do this, do this, do this. And that wasn't very interesting. So I took another 6 months and turned it into 3 fictional characters following their stories through. So there was Edward, Cheryl, and James. And I showed how Edward, he was a tier 1 owner operator, and what happened when he got ready to exit, and he had to go through this earnout process that sucked another 5 years out of his life, and blah, blah, blah. And then I told Cheryl's story about how she was the owner manager, but she had built it in a way that she could have this maximum exit. But the problem with her story is that even though she maximized her exit, she did it at the choice of sacrificing her relationship with her kids for 10 years. And so by the time she had all the money she wanted, her kids were a little bit alienated from her. And that's not what we want. And then I tell the story of James, who set his business up from the beginning of how he knew that one day he was going to exit the daily operations so that it could run without him. And because he started at the beginning, he didn't make as much money as Cheryl did. He didn't have some of the things that Edward did, but he had the best lifestyle. He had what I call the exit lifestyle.
So when you start looking at exiting in those systems to be able to run it, right? If you're not there, you're not watching people. What is he doing? What are they doing? What are they doing? How are they doing it? What are they doing? How do you run the business?
So what do you mean? How do they run the business? What do you mean?
So if you're not as owner, you're not there watching everybody and seeing what they're doing, right? Keeping everybody accountable, keeping the energy going. How do you put it together so they figure out, what do you do to make sure that people are doing what they need to do to run the business?
So we over the last decade or so, the word dashboard has become part of our common vernacular as entrepreneurs and business people. As we want to look at dashboards, whether it's social media performance or financial performance, et cetera. And it is my belief and contention, and now based on working with hundreds of other entrepreneurs, that we as entrepreneurs can run our businesses on a dashboard of certain metrics. And every business is going to have different metrics, but every business will have some same metrics. And that primarily is around profitability. I particularly like, if you look at your P&L and you run one extra column called percent of income. And for those that are into P&Ls and balance sheets, you know what that looks like. Just go into QuickBooks, you click one thing, and it'll tell you this line is 100% of your income, because that's all your income. And then the next line is your COGS, your cost of goods sold, and that's going to be a certain percentage of the income. And I believe that entrepreneurs can adequately run and make sure the company's running correctly and in a healthy way by reviewing that P&L and balance sheet monthly, among other things. There's other dashboard pieces that everybody's going to need, but looking at that percent of income, because if your percent of income stays within a decimal point every single month and the top line continues to go up, you're good. But if you come in and all of a sudden your COGS went up 10%, oh, there's a problem. And then you can go diagnose, figure out what that problem is, and then fix it. But it doesn't require you to be there every day, run every meeting. It can't be a cult of personality. It's got to be based on written, documented systems.
That's where I was going right there. The written, documented systems, right? Getting systems that people can reproduce every day, right? So they got a standard operating setup. This is what I do on Mondays. Here's what I do on Tuesdays. Here's a matrix, metrics I'm trying to beat. Where I can start to chart and watch and see. All right, am I graphing up? Am I graphing down? Right?
Yep.
You start to be able to see and have a measurable result based on a matrix rather than just showing up every day, winging it and hoping that you're doing a good job.
That's true. I mean, your SOPs, your standard operating procedures, have to be written. They have to be thorough, and they have to be followed. So it's not just enough to have them written and they have to be thorough, but if they're not followed, it doesn't matter. So you got to make sure that they're followed. And a lot of times in SOP, we conflate that with the training manual. And that's why people don't write them, because they think, I don't want to have to sit down and write out how to do everything. No, an SOP is not how to do everything. It's who, what, and when. That's it. That's what an SOP is. Who does it? What do they do? And when do they do it? That's an SOP. So you're not telling them the how. That's a training manual, and that's a separate thing. I could hire a salesperson and say, look, here's your SOP for selling. I'm not telling them how to sell. I'm telling them who does what and when do they do it. That's an SOP. So SOPs aren't this big boogeyman that a lot of people think, and they go out and hire these very expensive consultants to help them. And I'm not saying they're not helpful, but sometimes if you just spend a few hours in a weekend, you could probably write all the SOPs for your business.
I find that, at least for me, through the years, I've watched, SOPs come in, they go, we're great at them sometimes, and then sometimes we're not. It's kind of like going to the gym. Like, you'll go through these behaviors where, I'm going to the gym all the time. I'm taking, care of my health, and I'm good eating habits. And then sometimes I go off the reservation. And sometimes I can watch that happen in the organizations I run. I call them like colds. Like all of a sudden you notice, all right, things are getting messed up, right? And you start looking, people aren't following what we know to do to be successful, right? Every time I have a problem out here, it's something that started way back here, right? It's always hey, we got to change orders for something over here. Well, did someone go back and go through and quantify a bid properly over here? And then I can look at, especially in construction, I can always see, the problems didn't happen on the job site that day. They started 3 weeks ago, right? And it's almost like a standard, you know, I can almost say it's 100% of the time. I don't know if I can say 100%, but look, it's almost 100% of the time. I can always go back to something that we didn't do back when we should have done it that causes that effect. And you know, so I think it's a good spot to start in. Now, for me, there was a big change in one of my coaches where the thing she had to do to change me was she comes to my office one day, right? This is a great story. She walks in my office and she's this big redheaded woman, and she walks in. She's got all this energy. Anthony, today we're going to lock you in your office. I'm like, oh, great. We're going to be in my office, and I get to focus, and nobody will bother me. I lock the door. I have an open door policy. People come to my office all day. If you look at my office, it's like O'Hare, like the lights, the landing lights. People just kind of standing out there, they're all out there just waiting to come in and wait for Anthony. Oh, he's going to break. People just swarm around the outside. You know, I was needed, right? Look, I love being needed, right? And she's like, oh, no, today we're going to lock your door. I'm like, oh, great. She goes, I can focus today. She goes, no. We're locking you in. I went, what do you mean you're locking me? I go, yeah. She goes, look, you have all these great people you've hired, but you keep walking out there and you step on all their air hoses, right? Somewhere you get a payoff from this. I go, what do you mean I get a payoff from this? I don't be bothered. They should be doing that stuff. I don't need to. No. Look, they want to do that stuff, and you keep walking out there and you're creating the need of you to be there. And I go, no, I don't. She goes, no, you do. Watch what's going to happen. You get 6 1-hour meetings a week with these 6 people. And I was like, okay, wait. So I get 6 one-on-ones a week. And I had, my accountant, these people. And I'm like, great, I'll create these lists and I'll be able to make sure each one of those people follow their list. And then we can go through their lists and their tasks and make sure they do it. And in the 6 one-on-ones that I have, which now I only have 4 one-on-ones, out of the 4 one-on-ones I have a week, I don't talk anything about lists. 99% of the time we're talking about them and what some things they might need to help out, or I can help out. But most of the time it has nothing to do with, are you doing your job and that type of stuff. Most of it is, what kind of stuff can I help them with this week to, support them in something. But it's just funny how that shift happened and I couldn't even see it until somebody called me out on it.
Yeah, well, all of us as entrepreneurs, we're operating with blinders on. We're zoomed into our business, which is, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. It's made us successful and brought us to where we are. But that's the importance of business coaches. The importance of business coaches and masterminds and outside advisors to come in and see things that you can't see. Because if you're looking at it through blinders like this, for the people that are not watching this, I got my hands up on either side of my eyes. A business coach will take those off and they can get a 180-degree perspective on what's happening. They have much more peripheral vision around things. And they can say, well, look, if you keep doing that, here's what's going to happen. Oh, well, you're right. That makes sense. I would have never seen that had you not brought it up. That's the importance of, listen to podcasts like this or reading books or hiring coaches. We get to see things we wouldn't see in our myopic view of our own world.
And I think that's the truest thing to be said about having a coach, a mentor, a mastermind group. It's if I would have known then what I know now about it, I would have done this a lot earlier. But maybe it was a young ego, or maybe it was, I'm not sure what caused that, but there was a lot of I didn't know that I could live this way then.
Yeah. Well, I think all of us say that, right? I didn't hire a business coach until I think it was 2016. The first time I ever hired a business coach. I'd been in business at that point for 6 years. I didn't even know business coaches were a thing. I had no idea. I didn't know what that was. And man, within 2 years, I'd gone from where we were struggling to $1 million bottom line. Now, my business coach didn't do the work, but he made me realize and see what needed to be done. And that made all the difference.
So talk a little bit about you've got these mastermind groups, right? Let's say I'm a young entrepreneur. Let's talk about the criteria to get into one of your masterminds. What does it take to get into it?
So US-based entrepreneurs doing at least $3 million a year in revenue, or if your revenue is lower than that, as long as you have 300 in EBITDA, 300K in EBITDA, you're qualified to have a conversation with us.
Oh, great. So now you get qualified, you come on board, have a meeting with you and your team.
Yeah, either me or one of my exit and growth advisors. We have a standard set of questions that we kind of go through, like what's happening in your business, because we can't help everybody. There's what we do is very specific. You got to be coachable. There's certain things you have to be open to. And once we figure out that you're a good fit, we'll offer you a spot in our mastermind, and then you can come in and take the ride with us.
So they get accepted in the mastermind and talk about, is it a daily thing, a weekly thing, a monthly thing?
So we do 2 monthly meetings on Zoom, and those meetings are about an hour and a half. And one of the 2 meetings a month is either I or one of our coaches. There's 6 coaches in the program. We do a deep dive training into different topics. Like our training this week is on taking the guesswork out of what it looks like to sell your business. What does it look like to list your business for sale? And our investment banking coach, who's actually a partner in an investment banking firm, is going to be going through that. Like, what does it look like to demystify the selling process? So that's once a month. And then the second one a month is our XOS roundtable. And XOS is our proprietary method called Exeter Operating System. And it's our 7 stages of getting yourself from to owner dependent, you're an owner operator, all the way to owner investor. So we do a roundtable discussion once a month where we talk about how to implement this particular stage in your business. So those are 2 meetings per month. And then every week, one of our coaches does an office hours. We do those on Thursdays. And every Thursday, you have 1 hour to hop in as a group. Maybe 2 people show up, maybe 15 people show up. It doesn't matter, but you get to ask any question you want of the coach. So if you got a legal question, when our legal coach is there, go ask a question. If you got a finance question, you can wait to our finance coach, et cetera. It's kind of the cheat code. Plus, there's 24 hours a day on our chat group. All the coaches are in there and all the other members are in there. So you can ask any question. Hey, does anybody have somebody who does this? So those are our cadence on a month-to-month basis. And then in 2026, we're doing 3 live workshops in Nashville. It's a 2-day workshop in Nashville. And then every other year we do a retreat as well, where we go away for a weekend and have this big weekend. We just actually did ours 2 weeks ago before recording this episode.
That's awesome. Having been part of those kind of groups, there's something about the fellowship, the time together, just having those other entrepreneurs in your relationship base. That's just, having people that are going through what you're going through to bounce ideas off of it, that just creates a great camaraderie.
Yeah. I tell you what, and we have a very good high retention rate. And I believe it's because we don't have any self-centered jerks in here. We have really good, genuine people. They're coachable. They're easy to talk to, easy to hang out around. And so we don't get together in person often, but when we do, it's like we've known each other for years, and we just pick right up where we heard them talking on the Zoom call last month about the issue they had with their assistant or their salesperson or whatever. It's really good communication that keeps that fellowship alive.
As you start to look out in front of us, right, in a world that's changing faster than most of us can even understand, right, with an AI driven environment out there, what are you coaching folks, and how do you see the future entrepreneurship evolving?
Well, I think one of the biggest commodity that we all have access to in equal amounts, yet we all waste to our own detriment, is time. Time is a non-renewable resource, where money, on the other hand, is a renewable resource. You can waste 100 grand and go make it back. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but you can get that back. But if you waste 100 hours, you don't get those back. They never come back. And the older you get, the more your mortality comes into view. So time is what I believe AI is going to save us as entrepreneurs more than anything else. I mean, how much time do you spend doing things that AI could do for you in a split second? Let's go back to our conversation, Anthony, about SOPs. Like, sit down with Claude. Claude's my favorite. I use ChatGPT too, but Claude's my favorite. And you just go and say, look, I need you to act as an SOP expert. That's your job. You're going to act as an SOP expert. You're going to ask me a series of questions, one at a time, about this particular system or process. And then you tell it what the process is. And then you give them a little bit of information about what you're trying to accomplish. And then and then you tell it, I want you to help me create an SOP for that system or process. And I'm telling you, within 15 minutes, that whole SOP is going to be written. Where if you sat down alone with a piece of paper, or you just open up Word doc and you start typing, you might take a few hours to do that because you don't know where you're going, where AI can tell you really fast where you need to be heading. And that's just one example. Job descriptions, contracts, agreements. I mean, there's so much that can be done so fast with AI. If we're not leveraging it, we're missing out.
I would say to you, in 2025, I've just watched I hired a group of prompt engineers, that has been working on stuff for us throughout the company that are just revolutionizing the way SOPs happen, the way that we communicate. We've actually created Zoe. Zoe is our, remember Hal from, was it 2001 Odyssey?
Yes, Space Odyssey.
Space Odyssey, right? We've got Zoe, and Zoe's become our AI agent here at the company, and just amazing where I can see her going as a future. I mean, look, I've even got a relationship with Zoe. My wife isn't jealous yet, but she laughs at me. Yeah, but it's this. We've got some superintendents, some project managers that today are putting all of their sub bids, all of their contracts, and all of their language in there, so they can instant access. They can find points in a second. The things that they're being able to do in this AI world is just amazing. It's been a lot of fun, and I can see that being something that's really sellable later on, right? This AI agent that runs your organization, that, again, just a big chunk of labor that it took to manage all of the software, all this. I mean, the hardest problem we've always had as a company is software integration. Today, Zoe just talks to you.
Yeah. Well, that's so true. I mean, and if you think about it, going back to some of what we've talked about with the 3 tiers of entrepreneurial evolution, is that our job as the architect of our business, because that is we are the architect of the business. It really boils down to 3 things. Number 1, set the vision. It's your job to set the vision for the company. Number 2 is to communicate that vision on a regular and clear basis. And number 3 relates to what you just said, build the asset. Like, how do we build the company as an asset? Maybe that's building assets for the company, but whatever it is, like IP, or maybe you got your own AI agent, maybe it's owning real estate, maybe it's putting together certain processes that are unique, proprietary to your business. That's building the asset. And guess what? If you're still operating by scooping all the ice cream and ordering all the ice cream and taking the people's money at the desk, at the counter, you don't have time to build the asset. That's why you've got to move out of owner operator into owner manager, and then ultimately into owner investor if you ever want to have a chance of exiting successfully.
All right. What's one of the takeaways that you can leave the listener with, especially those that are still in a deep grind about creating freedom without walking away from business that you've built?
Well, Harvard Business Review published a study and found that companies with documented systems and processes would receive 20 to 30% higher valuations than similar companies who don't. So think about this. You could have the same company as your friend in another city doing the same thing, but you've documented everything. He hasn't. You could have the same revenue, the same everything else. You're going to get 30% more in your valuation than him. That means he's leaving 30%, a third almost of his value on the table, simply because he didn't write down what he's already doing. That's a takeaway. We got to write this crap down. It makes the company run better, but it also makes it worth a lot more money.
It's awesome. If folks want to join your mastermind group and they want to get involved with you, Jason, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, I would invite people to come to a free training. I do a 60-minute briefing called What to Fix Before You Exit, and it's completely free. And even maybe this conversation is not enough for you to know that I know what I'm talking about. Maybe you want to see, well, what is it really behind the scenes? Well, come to this. Go to whattofixbeforeyouexit.com, whattofixbeforeyouexit.com. Sign up. It's free. It's not a sales pitch in disguise. It's not some funnel that we're putting you into to make sure you buy something, but it will give you a sense of understanding, oh, well, what do I need to do? And then beyond that, if you want to talk to me, there'll be opportunities for us to connect.
That's amazing. Listen, folks, if you're out there and you're looking for that freedom, if you're looking that someday you can find a way to sell your business and exit it, all I can tell you is there's no bigger gift than finding a coach, finding a mastermind group like Jason's group to join. It just, look, if I would have known then what I know now, I would have done it sooner. So for those of you that are thinking that way or not even sure you want to think that way, go take the leap and try it out. And we'll put all the contact for that down below. Jason, thanks for being on the show today.
It's an honor. Thanks for the good conversation, Anthony.
Same. Thanks.
Attention business owners. Attention business owners. Feeling burnout from running your business? Uncertain if you're nearing burnout? Take our free 10-question business burnout test at businessburnouttest.com to discover where you stand. With just 10 quick questions, you'll learn how to immediately begin making changes to regain freedom and success. Cut your daily operations time in half. Improve your quality of life and prepare your business for your future exit without losing revenue or profit. Visit businessburnouttest.com now and take the test. Thank you for listening to another edition of The Root of All Success with the real Jason Duncan. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, visit therootofallsuccess.com to access the show notes and other helpful resources. Follow Jason on social media at The Real Jason Duncan. See you again next time here on The Root of All Success.